Fremantle.
Thank you, Speaker. I'm glad to speak to this motion. I thank the member for McKellar for bringing it forward for debate. And I say at the outset, we're not delaying this critical area of reform. We've begun to deliver on it already. We'll do more of that this week, and we'll keep going on that path until the job is done. But as the member for McKellar says, the basic situation with respect to Australia's environment is not hard to understand. It's not a heartening story. The 2021 State of Australia's Environment report found that our environment is poor and deteriorating, and of course the previous government hid that report out of embarrassment at their inaction. Speaker, in 2020, Professor Graham Samuels produced his independent review of the EPBC Act and found that Australia's natural environment and iconic places are in an overall state of decline and are under increasing threat. What did the coalition government do in response to that report? Sadly, nothing. And so, Speaker, we come to government being under no illusion that our country's environment and biodiversity have undergone significant harm and are facing extraordinary pressures, especially now through climate change. And we're responding to that crisis, which was utterly neglected by a coalition government for a decade that slashed funding to the Environment Department by 40%. As the member for McKellar acknowledges, it's a large and complex task, but it is urgent. And the Minister for Environment has acted on the basis that there is no time to waste. That's why we've pushed out the environmental protection effort in every direction, getting on with the larger regulatory reform task, while at the same time pushing ahead immediately with a number of restorative measures. Indeed, in the first 2 years of the Albanese Labor government, we've tripled the size of the Macquarie Island Marine Park, adding a protected marine zone larger than the size of Germany. We've kicked off the $200 million Urban Rivers and Catchments program. We've made the global 30 by 30 commitment. We'll conserve separately 30% of our land and marine territory by 2030. We've joined the high ambition Coalition to End Plastic Pollution. We've expanded our Antarctic science program. We're investing $23 million over the next year to develop a new national circular economy framework, and we've provided $224.5 million over the next 4 years through the Saving Native Species program to support the recovery of our unique plants, animals and ecological communities. And we've done those things, Speaker, while working steadily to achieve EPBC reform, the first instalment of which we actually delivered as quickly as possible last year with an expanded and strengthened water trigger as promised. Now we're delivering the next stage of the nature-positive reforms with the creation of Australia's first independent environmental protection agency, a long-awaited and massive reform, and alongside that the critically important new function of Environment Information Australia. For too long, Speaker, we simply haven't been able to see clearly the joined-up picture of Australia's environmental condition and biodiversity, and that's resulted in a piecemeal approach to assessing impact, which has put our environment on the path to death by 1,000 cuts. We cannot allow that to continue, and that's why we're implementing the recommendations of the Samuel Review to significantly update Australia's national environmental laws. And it's important to recognise that the approach we're taking to deliver that reform is endorsed by Graham Samuel himself. It's important for people to recognise that. Speaker, the current EPBC Act is more than 1,000 pages long, and the complexity of the reform task is considerable. The consultation process to date has been broad and searching and extensive, and while I've heard from lots of people who understandably want this reform completed as quickly as possible, I've also heard from lots of community members and indeed environmental stakeholders who keep insisting, quite rightly, that consultation cannot be rushed. This reform cannot be rushed. That kind of balance between rapid reform towards a much-needed change and proper consultative engagement that delivers high-quality and lasting reform is precisely the challenge of good government. I say with great respect to the member for McKellar that it's often been the case with members of the crossbench that one day we'll hear that things aren't being done quickly enough, and the next day we'll hear that things are being done too quickly. That's politics, I guess. Certainly it's convenient if you want to create the impression from time to time that there's something not quite right about the government, which, hallelujah, the crossbench is always here to help us correct. But, Speaker, I understand the strength of logic that is driving the call on us, the Australian government, from the broader Australian community to make some stark and substantial changes as quickly and resolutely as it can be done. That's always been a huge focus of my work, and people should know that in Tanya Plibersek, the member for Sydney, you have a Minister for the Environment who is absolutely committed and absolutely indefatigable in her application to that task. Finally, let me say clearly that, contrary to the terms of this motion, we have not resiled from anything. The Australian environment desperately needs a period of stable, sustained and reforming government, an Albanese Labor government.